In 1869, the Civil War hero Ulysses S. Grant became president. Unlike Johnson, Grant cared deeply about American blacks. And with his support over the next years, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875, outlawing discrimination in hotels, theaters, and amusement parks. It was the last great legislation of Reconstruction. But just a year later, Grant's successor, Rutherford B. Hayes, ordered federal soldiers to be pulled out of the South. He said he believed the promises of Southern whites that they would protect black rights.
My judgment was that the time had come to put an end to bayonet rule, to wipe out the color line, to abolish sectionalism and bring peace. The Army was withdrawn because I believed it a wise thing to do.
But the Southern promises proved worthless, and no one was left there to enforce civil rights for African Americans. Reconstruction was over.
Reconstruction was a great opportunity to really build a new society in the South from the ashes of slavery, and to, for the first time, really bring African Americans fully into the realm of American freedom. You might say that the amazing thing is that it was tried at all, just 2 or 3 years after the ending of slavery. It didn't succeed, it was overthrown, a new system of white supremacy was enforced in the South. It left to the next century, really, to work out this question of whether there is going to be a racial boundary around the concept of freedom in American life.
In 1883, the Supreme Court made a fateful decision. They voted to nullify the Civil Rights Act of 1875. That meant that from now on, there could once again be whites-only hotels, restaurants, barbershops, and theaters. Black leader Henry McNeil Turner knew he had been betrayed by the nation's highest court.
It was a hard task to get an enactment through Congress that contemplated anything like civil rights. Now, a Republican Supreme Court has declared the whole thing null and void, leaving the Negro in a condition compared with which the serfs of Russia are lords. I have not deserted the Republican Party. The Republican Party has deserted me and 7 million of my race.
And an aging Frederick Douglass, now a public official in Washington, expressed his disgust.
Men talk about the Negro problem. There is no Negro problem. The problem is whether American people have loyalty enough, honor enough, patriotism enough to live up to their own Constitution. We Negroes love our country. We fought for it. We ask only that we be treated as well as those who fought against it.
The color line in America applied also to trains, which increasingly separated passengers on the basis of race. In 1892, a 30-year-old black man named Homer Plessy was arrested for sitting in a whites-only railroad car. Arguing that his civil rights had been violated, a citizens committee took his case all the way to the Supreme Court. The justices listened to the arguments in the case of Plessy v. Ferguson, and in 1896, they made a ruling. Justice John Marshall Harlan wrote in favor of Homer Plessy.
In view of the Constitution, in the eye of the law, there is in this country no superior dominant ruling class of citizens. There is no caste here. Our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens.
But Harlan's was a lone voice on the court, and all the other justices voted against Plessy. Justice Henry Billings Brown wrote the decision that spoke for the majority.
The 14th Amendment calls for the absolute equality of the two races before the law. But it could not have been intended to abolish distinctions based upon color or to enforce social equality or a commingling of the races.
What this meant was that though the races were equal before the law, local laws could prevent people of different races from mingling. In other words, if public facilities were equal, they could be separate. And so the age of legalized segregation began. The Ohio legislator Benjamin Arnett described the effect of the court's ruling.
I have traveled in this free country for 20 hours without anything to eat, not because I had no money to pay for it, but because I was colored. Other passengers of lighter hue had breakfast, dinner, and supper. In traveling, we are thrown in Jim Crow cars, denied the privilege of buying a berth in the sleeping coach. This foe of my race stands at the schoolhouse door and separates the children by reasons of color and denied to those who have a visible admixture of African blood in them the blessings of a graded school and equal privileges.
Over a period of just 30 years, the opportunity for freedom opened up by the Civil War had been lost. W.E.B. Du Bois summed up the tragic failure of the era.
The slave went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, then moved back again toward slavery.
We all know about the great civil rights movement of the 1960s. How differently might American history have unfolded if the first civil rights movement of the 1860s had succeeded? I'm Katie Couric. Join me again for Freedom, a History of Us.